Okay. Hi, my name is Gabrielle Sokolsky, and I'm the entomologist and the assistant superintendent for the Cape Cod Mosquito Control Project. We're a quasi-state organization. We work for our 15-member towns. So all the way from Provincetown over across the canal to Borne and Sandwich over there. We were established back in 1930. I'd like to say we were established for some honorable disease-related, whatever it is, reasons. And I guess they are honorable reasons depending on where you're coming from. But we were actually organized because a bunch of businesses got together on Cape Cod. And they wanted to know how to keep people here longer. They wanted people to stay, spend their money. And they thought maybe if they got rid of all those mosquitoes that people were slapping, maybe they'd stay a little longer and enjoy their visit more. So it makes life more enjoyable for the people who live here year-round as well as for those people who come in to visit. We're the first organized mosquito control project in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We've been around since 1930, so it's a long time. I'm an entomologist, so I'm going to show pictures of bugs. I can't help myself. Mosquitoes go through complete metamorphosis, and I'm going to talk about each one of their life stages just a little bit, because what we use at Cape Cod Mosquito Control Project to control mosquitoes is integrated pest management. And integrated pest management starts with knowing your pests, knowing where in your pest's life cycle they're at their most vulnerable point. So that's what we focus on here on the Cape. The first life stage of mosquitoes is the egg stage. Mosquitoes lay their eggs on or around standing water. So this right here is a mosquito egg raft. They look like rye seeds, sort of that size, sitting on top of the water, but they don't quite sink. Each one of those egg rafts is about 200 eggs approximately that she's laying, and again, on or around standing water. And you'll see that that's the theme. Standing water is what mosquitoes need to live. The next stage that mosquitoes go through is the larval stage. So they hatch from those eggs and they come out. So this is the mosquito larva. What you can see is at the very top, they live in standing water and they need to breathe. So at the top right here is the siphon. That's the end of the mosquito. It's sort of like a snorkel. She has to push that through the edge of the water so that she can get oxygen to breathe, or he. This is the mosquito's abdomen and thorax, just like any other insect. They have all these body parts. And this is the head down here. Mosquito larvae are filter feeders. They're using the hairs at the front of their body to grab up anything in the water, bacteria, algae, whatever it is, and that's what they're feeding on. And when I talk about what we do to control mosquitoes, that will be part of it, that behavior right there. The next stage is the pupal stage. Again, takes place in standing water. So you can see the theme. If you have standing water sitting in anything in your yard, after it rains today, tonight, tomorrow, Saturday, go around your yard, make sure to empty it out, because that's what the mosquitoes are depending on. So anyway, this stage is where the mosquito is going through metamorphosis. So it'd be like a butterfly in their chrysalis getting ready to emerge as an adult. And you can see the adult stages, the adult structures are starting to form, like the wings, things like that. The pupal stage of the mosquito still has to get to the water surface. Those are her snorkels right there. They're called trumpets in this stage. And she moves around with these swimming paddles. So she kind of tumbles around. A lot of people call them tumblers when they look at the pupal stage. They're kind of circular. And one of the reasons why they have to move, not only to get up to the surface to breathe, but also because there are other things in the water with them, potentially predators that might feed on them. So they're going through the water, moving around so that they can go away from the predators. This is the life stage that I think most people, unfortunately, are familiar with, the adult mosquito. So the male and female adult mosquitoes feed on nectar. They go to flowers, they feed on nectar. Nectar is sugar. It's energy to fly around, to find each other, to find a blood meal. That's all that male mosquitoes feed on. His mouth parts are modified so that that's all he can feed on. Female mosquitoes feed on blood as well. They need the protein in your blood to develop their eggs. So that's why it's only the females that bite. I like this picture because what it shows you is I think a lot of people look at the mosquito's head and they think of this long mouth part, the proboscis, as like a straw. It's not, though. You can see in this picture, it's actually a sheath that as she bites, it pulls back, and there are lots of different mouth parts under there. She has to do a lot of things. She has to have mouth parts that are like swords because she has to be able to pierce your skin. if she wants to get the blood out. She also has 2 tubes in there. One of those tubes she uses to spit her saliva into you, because as you know, when you get a cut, you don't keep bleeding. You start to clot right away. She adds an anticoagulant into your blood so that it stays a liquid and keeps that from clotting. That's also when she transmits diseases. So if a disease has evolved to be able to be transmitted by mosquitoes, it needs to find a way out of the mosquito's gut and into her salivary glands, so when she spits her saliva into you, the disease will go into you then. So she has that tube, and her second tube is for actually sucking up the blood. So there is at least 1 straw in there. We have about 25 common species of mosquitoes on Cape Cod. They all lay their eggs and develop in different habitats. It makes it easier for me and my crews to do their job, because if somebody calls my office and they're having a mosquito problem, anyone who lives in Barnstable County can do this, then I will send a crew to that actual address, and they will look around to see where the mosquitoes are coming from. Because we control the mosquitoes in their developmental stages, in that larval and pupal stage, we're gonna have to look for the source, where those mosquitoes are coming from to do that. And if the species all live in different habitats, if somebody brings me a mosquito, and sometimes we'll have somebody call and the crew won't be able to find the source, I'll say, you know, catch a mosquito and keep it for me. If I look at that mosquito and identify it to species, I can tell you whether that mosquito is coming from, some swampy area, some area where the rain fell on grass and it just temporarily filled up, whether it's coming from a tire in somebody's yard or a tarp in somebody's yard, or whether it's coming from the salt marsh. So we have, most of those species are freshwater species, about 22 species of freshwater mosquitoes, again, laying their eggs in each one of these different types of habitats. We also have 3 species of salt marsh mosquitoes. 2 of them are actually in the salt marsh itself. We have a northern salt marsh mosquito and a southern salt marsh mosquito. And I don't have an opinion necessarily on climate change that I'd like to share, but what I'd like to say is that southern salt marsh mosquito, I've seen their populations go up over the past few years. Something's changing in that habitat. When I first started mosquito control, like 25 years ago, I'm so old. When I first started, they were an oddity. I'd find 1 salt marsh mosquito that was the southern species. Now I see lots of them. It's probably half and half, southern and northern species. Those salt marsh mosquitoes are very different from freshwater mosquitoes. Salt marsh mosquitoes are the type of mosquitoes that'll bite you in the middle of the day. They'll bite you in the middle of the day, and they'll fly for miles to find a blood meal. They'll fly 5 or 10 miles very easily to look for a blood meal to bite somebody. So anyone on Cape Cod at any time could be having a salt marsh mosquito problem. They're very aggressive. Whereas those freshwater mosquitoes that I was talking about before, those are the type you usually see at dusk or at nighttime. That's when they come out, that's when they're biting, and they don't fly very far. So if you have mosquitoes that are freshwater mosquitoes that are biting you in the evenings, they're coming from very close to your house. So maybe even your yard, or we do get a lot of calls where people are pretty sure it's their neighbor's yard that's causing the problem. And we'll take a look. My crews will go out, we'll take a look. We'll let people know, because part of what we do is education. So integrated pest management, the first step is identifying your pest, and then the second step is to go out and monitor for your pest. So way back in the 20s, they actually hired an entomologist, which I think is the most fabulous job, to walk all of Barnstable County and identify areas in this county where mosquitoes might be developing. Again, standing water. And that's what they did. They cut up the county up into these 143 quadrants, and they actually walked it and mapped it. So this is a picture, this is one of those maps. We still have those maps in my office. They're hand-drawn. This is one of the sections of Falmouth. I figured I'm in Falmouth speaking, so I might as well bring a Falmouth map. And what they did was they classified the different habitats by different colors. It's actually, somebody drew that on. And what they did was, for each one of these mosquito habitats, they gave them a unique identifying number. So for instance, 161 or 161F. These are sites that we continue to use today. So we used these maps. Those maps were, every 20 years we had somebody redo them, because with development things have changed. In the 90s we had them digitized, so we went from things that were on paper and handwritten to something on the computer. And today we're using ArcGIS Online. So what we have today is we're using actually maps in the trucks. All of our trucks have iPads, and on each one of these iPads, you have these sites marked. They open up the wetlands layers. They have these sites marked, and they can take a look at each one of these sites. They can tell things like how big it is. They can put in all of the information if they found mosquitoes there, if they had to do something there. So we keep all of that historical data, whatever type of work we've done there. And that information comes to our office then pretty much real time. So when someone calls our office and says, I live at 252 Main Street, when is the last time a crew was at the swamp behind my house? Our administrative assistant, Katie, can look that up right away and give them an idea of exactly what date they were there. So integrated pest management is really using a variety of different methods to control mosquito populations. And so this is what we're doing when we're monitoring out there throughout the summer. So this is what my crews are doing right now. They're literally with boots on in the wet areas, in the salt marshes, in the swamps, taking scoops of water to see if there are mosquitoes in the water developing there. So this is one of those dippers that he was scooping with, and this is taking a look in at it. Those are all mosquito larvae. So one of the things we talk about is whether we've hit a threshold where we need to do some control. Yeah, this is enough mosquitoes that we really need to do some control. That's going to be a lot of flying mosquitoes annoying people. So again, integrated pest management is using a variety of different methods to control the mosquito populations. One of the things that we do, half of our year actually, is spent on water management. So this is a picture, this is an aerial shot of the Great Marsh in West Barnstable, but this could be any marsh on Cape Cod. Before mosquito control was around, back at the turn of the last century, so over 100 years ago, people started to put together how diseases were being transmitted. Up until that time, up until the early 1900s, diseases were unknown, what was causing different diseases. Malaria, which literally means bad air, was thought to be transmitted by opening up your window at night and breathing in all that stinky swamp air, bad air. What they realized then was, with germ theory and all that, what they realized was that malaria was actually being transmitted by the mosquitoes. You opened up your window at night, and it wasn't the bad air that came in, it was all those mosquitoes that came in. And when they bit you, they were transmitting malaria. So at that time, one of the things that happened was globally, humans started to look at how to control mosquito populations, because they may not know everything, all the diseases they were transmitting, but they knew by that time they were transmitting malaria and yellow fever, things like that. So how to get rid of mosquitoes. And at that time, I'm pretty sure they were thinking they were going to be able to eradicate mosquitoes. Obviously, that didn't happen. One of the ways that they decided to go about that was to put in these ditches in the salt marshes, because they knew a lot of the mosquitoes, especially those really aggressive ones during the day, were coming from this type of a place in the salt marshes. So if you look at any of our marshes now, what you'll see is these ditches. So again, these ditches were put in before mosquito control was around, and a lot of these ditches were put in by work projects, and people were being paid to put in ditches by the foot. So I can't say all the ditches were exactly important. So today what we do is selective ditch maintenance. We take a look at what's going on the marshes, and if ditches play an important part in controlling mosquito populations, and some of the most important ones are these that go up to the ponds. The reason that this ditch is so important is it's a nice shallow ditch. Fish can go up and down that ditch and go into that pool of water and eat all the mosquito larvae. If the fish can get to the pool of water, then we don't have to walk out there in our boots and kill mosquitoes. Fish are fantastic mosquito predators. They eat them by the thousands. So these ditches weren't meant to drain the marshes. They were meant to allow fish up into the low spots of the marshes. They're also helping after a big moon event or a large rain event to help the water move more smoothly and more quickly off the marsh. But the intent was never to drain any marshes. The intent was to allow predators access to these places. If they have access to those places, then my crews don't have to worry about it. Just to give you an idea of how much work we do in 2016, first of all, when you're doing ditch maintenance, we're doing this work from October through March, to the end of March. Once you get out to the marsh or out to any of these places, you can't just walk up to these ditches. There's a lot of stuff growing around them. So a lot of our work is just brushing paths so they can access these ditches to do maintenance. I have to say, the town of Falmouth has been very helpful because now it's been a number of years. We were doing ditch maintenance, and I want to say it was Salt Pond Place, perhaps, and we had somebody from the invasives committee come in and talk to us about how to do this type of maintenance in areas where you have Phragmites to prevent the spread of Phragmites. They also came in and showed us what native Phragmites look like. I'm a bug person, not a plant person, so I was glad somebody could show me that. I would not have known that. So I have to say that people have been very helpful, and so we use these ditches to get into these sites so we can do maintenance. And then in the summertime, we can go back and check them if there are mosquitoes in them. We also do a lot of hand clearing of the ditches. So this is actually a picture of a freshwater ditch system. We have salt marsh ditches. We also have a lot of freshwater ditches on the Cape. As Cape Cod was developed, a lot of places that people built, roads were put in, the places where water used to run, natural creeks, were covered over. And the water still needed to run somewhere. So a lot of these ditch systems were put in. This ditch actually runs right through the town of Brewster, right in the middle of Brewster, parallel to 6A, the Considine ditch. And in the wintertime, our crews, I put up an idea of how many feet, over 165,000 feet of inland ditches were cleaned, and that's by hand. That's somebody out there in the wintertime with a rake or with a shovel opening up those ditches. It's very labor intensive. My crews are fantastic. They really care about what they do. It opens up that area so that it does a lot of things. It allows fish to run through there. A lot of the towns are now looking at stormwater management. It allows for stormwater management by going and checking these drainage systems to make sure that they're open. In fact, we've been working closely with Barnstable County. They've been working to help all of the towns get credit under the community rating system, so that once your town gets credit and they're acknowledged by FEMA to have credit under the community rating system, the residents and anyone who has flood insurance in that town gets a reduction in their flood insurance. And part of our work goes towards that reduction in your flood insurance. I'm looking to control mosquitoes, but in a way, I'm also looking to move water, and that's what stormwater management's all about. So it's like win-win, win-win. Most of our work is done by hand, and it makes, in a way, it's easier on the environment. You might have other things living in there. Turtles tend to overwinter in some of the salt marsh ditches, for instance. So with a rake, you could just easily pull them out and put them back again where they go. We do some work with the machine. Someday I'm going to show a picture of the front of this machine. How do I show this picture? Because this is the important part to me. This is a rotary ditcher. So what happens is this machine will go down a ditch. It pulls behind it that rotary ditcher. It spins and it picks up the spoil and it spreads it in a super thin layer across the marsh. This machine is a piston bully. It's the type of machine they use to groom the ski slopes. It's super light. It floats over the marsh. It's lighter than I am when I step per square inch on the marsh in my boots with the heel and everything, of course. So this machine is great. It goes along the marsh very easily. Once it goes by, it looks all muddy at first, but then the tide comes through, the grass pops up, it rains, whatever. You can't tell we've been there other than fish are now swimming up and down that ditch. So we do use that for a lot of different projects. One of the best part is that Army Corps does not consider that any impact to the marsh. So for me, it's a paperwork thing too. Not that I don't have to fill out the paperwork, but it's less paperwork. We're, again, making sure that water keeps moving. We work with a lot of towns and in a lot of places to make sure that pipes and culverts stay open. Again, it's the idea that this is a picture of a road behind, again, Sandy Neck. This is a road that goes out to the cottages at the end of that barrier beach. We have a few situations that are like this. We worked with the town to help get this culvert put in. You can see at the top, there's just a creek coming through the salt marsh. It should be a pretty good-sized creek headed this way. What was here before was a little rubber pipe, and every time somebody drove over it, it would squish, and then the water would get stuck. So a lot of times we work with towns and different organizations that are doing salt marsh restoration projects, because for me it's important to have that tidal flow back to its natural flow so the water can keep moving. Another one of those win-win type of situations. Okay, so that's water management. The other half of the year, which is what we're in now, we're out there doing treatments. So my crews, I have a picture of somebody carrying a can. Now we're using backpack sprayers. There are gonna be situations where water management is not gonna work. Places like swamps where there are a lot of different things that live in those swamps that need that standing water to be there. You wouldn't wanna drain that. That's beautiful. There's so many things living there. So what you want to do is go into that place and you want to kill the mosquito larva. You don't want to kill anything else. You just want to target the mosquito larva. So we use a bacteria, BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis. What happens is it's in those backpack sprayers. They spray it into the water. The mosquito larvae are filter feeders. They grab up that bacteria and ingest the bacteria. Their gut is alkaline. Your gut's acidic. So when that bacteria gets into that alkaline environment in their gut, the bacteria starts to live. It creates toxins, the mosquito larvae die. The craziest thing is, of all places, that bacteria, which we really rely on now, was discovered in dead mosquito larvae in the desert in Israel, in a little pool of all places. Anyway, so that's what we're doing this time of year. We're applying that bacteria. That bacteria is only in the environment for about 48 hours. So that's good. It's not building up. There's no bioaccumulation, anything like that. It's also bad because every couple weeks you have to keep going back to these sites to make sure that there aren't any mosquitoes there. And if there are, you have to treat them with the bacteria so that the mosquitoes will not develop into adults. So we do water management. We do larviciding to kill the larval mosquitoes. We don't do any spraying of adult mosquitoes. So we do get calls that come into our office. Somebody's having a mosquito problem. They have a house somewhere off Cape a lot of times, even in another county in Massachusetts, and they'll say they're having a mosquito problem. Could you come by and spray? We don't do that kind of mosquito control. We're gonna look for the source of the problem and we're gonna take care of it there. It may take a little while for the adults that are there to die, but you won't have that problem in the future. So the other thing we do is a lot of education. People call our office. We get about 300 or 400 calls in a summer, and it's people who are having a mosquito problem. And again, we send a crew out there. Usually the first question Katie, who answers the phone, will ask is, do you have any standing water on your property? And people always say no. No, I have no standing water. She'll say, well, the mosquitoes are coming from somewhere. I'll send out a crew, and they'll go take a look around and see where those mosquitoes are coming from. And sure enough, a lot of times, you saw the maps. Our crews know where the swamps are, where the salt marshes are. Not that there aren't times when we don't get there on time or whatever. But a lot of times, it's coming out of jars, containers in people's yards, just a little bit of water. This time of year, the water has to sit only a week. Within a week, a mosquito will lay her eggs, they'll go through the larval and pupal stage, and they'll be flying adults. And not just one or two, but you saw those egg rafts. You could have 20 of those egg rafts in a small jar. Each one of those egg rafts is a couple hundred mosquitoes. So a lot of times people don't realize that they can control the mosquitoes in their yard by just dumping out the containers that are holding water, that tarp, whatever it is. So one of the things with integrated pest management is once you do whatever you're going to do to control your pest, you've got to go back and see if it's effective. I think that's just good science anyway. We've done all this work to control the mosquito populations. So did it work or didn't it work? So this is what we're using to see if that happened. In this bucket is dry ice. I've got about 3 pounds of dry ice that I put in there. Dry ice is frozen carbon dioxide. As that dry ice turns from the solid to the gas, it's heavier than air, so that carbon dioxide falls down over this trap. Think about carbon dioxide, that's how mosquitoes find you. Every time you breathe out, mosquitoes smell that, sense that, come in to find it. So that's how they know something's there breathing and might have blood for them to feed on. So we use that carbon dioxide to bring in the mosquitoes. So mosquitoes will come from further away, smell that carbon dioxide. There's a little light under here and then a fan under that. So the mosquitoes will come in to the carbon dioxide. They'll go towards that little tiny light and the fan will suck them down into the net. I take them back to the lab, put them in the freezer. They go to sleep. And I take a look at what's out there. I count them, I see what species are there. Is our program effective? Is there anything out there that I should be concerned with? We put out traps, we put out 18 of those light traps all over Cape Cod in different sites, all the way from up in Provincetown, all the way around to Sagamore, all the way down to Woods Hole. That's a job. I hire somebody every summer. You can imagine what it's like to drive the trap route in the summer traffic all over Cape Cod. We like to spread out the traps. First of all, I want to see what's going on in all of my towns because I've got 15 towns that I'm controlling mosquitoes in. Each one of these traps are in different habitats. Well, not all of them, but they're spread out between different habitats. And that's so I can see what species are out there. Like I said, they're all developing in different habitats. Another thing is the rain patterns. A lot of times when you're driving the trap route, you'll get to Provincetown, it's sunny. You get to Chatham, Harwich area, it's foggy. You get to Woods Hole, it could be raining. Sagamore Marsh, it's sunny again. So we're looking at the different weather patterns and what's happening with the mosquito populations because of those weather patterns. And the one other thing we've got is we've got a few of these traps that are within Cape Cod National Seashore. Cape Cod National Seashore does not let us control mosquitoes in certain habitats because they're a native species, and they wouldn't want to control a native species. It's nice for me because I can't do any work there, and so I can take a look at what's happening in places where we don't do any work and compare it to the places where we are doing any work to see how effective our program is. So that's one of the reasons we're putting out traps. The other reason we're putting out traps are we're running different traps to look for the different viruses that are found in Massachusetts. On Cape Cod and in Massachusetts, the two viruses that we're concerned with are Eastern equine encephalitis and West Nile virus. Both of those diseases have the same disease cycle. A mosquito bites a bird that's infected with that disease and carries it to another bird. And that's the cycle. Mosquito, bird, that's where the disease is being amplified in nature. Every so often, a mosquito that bites birds bites a person and transmits that disease into the human population. If you were a virus, well, if viruses were alive, I'm not sure viruses are alive, if viruses could think, I know viruses can't think, they would never want to get into the human because that's the dead end for them. People can't, if you have Eastern equine encephalitis, no matter how sick you are, a mosquito can't bite you, get that virus, and then carry it to another person. There always has to be that bird in the middle of that cycle. So we'll talk first about Eastern equine encephalitis. I have had, and I'll show you later, where we've gotten positives for Eastern equine encephalitis in Barnstable County. This is the mosquito that vectors the disease, amplifies the disease among birds. So this is just a bird-biting mosquito. Mosquitoes are also specific about where they get their blood meals. On Cape Cod, we have some species of mosquitoes that only bite turtles. They're ridiculous, reptiles and amphibians, and you can see the turtles walking through the woods with a little cloud of mosquitoes following them. And they have really different mouth parts because you can imagine to bite turtles or to bite reptiles or amphibians, you would have to get through different type of skin than you would if you were biting a mammal. Anyway, this mosquito is a bird-biting mosquito. This is where that Eastern equine encephalitis virus is amplifying. She keeps feeding on the birds and picking up the disease and creating more of the disease inside of her. Eastern equine encephalitis is a very serious disease. It's got about a 40 to 50% mortality. So almost half the people who get that disease die from that disease. Eastern equine encephalitis causes encephalitis. Encephalitis is a symptom, it's not a disease. Encephalitis means your brain swells. That's not good. Brains don't bounce back very well. And I think everybody's been listening to in the news what's happening with the football players and the research they're doing with that. And I heard that there's going to be a talk on concussions later in this series coming up. Brains don't bounce back from things like that. I met a lady once at the Brewster Museum of Natural History when I was giving a talk who had gotten Eastern equine encephalitis when she was on a camping trip in New York State. Not here. We've never had a person in Barnstable County, I'm going to say, who's gotten Eastern equine encephalitis. She got Eastern equine encephalitis on that camping trip. She was in a coma for 2 weeks. She spent a year learning to walk and talk again, and by the time I met her, it was 20 years later, and she was still having symptoms from the disease. So even if you're lucky enough to survive, you tend to have lingering symptoms from the disease. That's why even though you may see in the state even in years when there are a lot of cases of Eastern encephalitis, it's relative. A lot of cases, human cases, might be 8. That's half of those people may die, and the other half of those people may need help for the rest of their lives. So that's why there's so much a focus on controlling mosquitoes for Eastern equine encephalitis. That bird-biting mosquito lays her eggs and develops in Atlantic white cedar swamps and red maple swamps. And I talk to people about that, and they say, I don't go anywhere near those habitats because there are other species of mosquitoes in these same habitats that are able to transmit the disease from birds to people. Those habitats are in the middle of every golf course practically on Cape Cod. People are walking by these things all the time. You don't have to take a walk in the woods to see, but they're beautiful, so you should. They're beautiful swamps. We're doing sampling at different locations around the Cape for mosquitoes that may be carrying potentially Eastern equine encephalitis. This is what we use. It's literally a box that's painted black on the outside and kind of rusty red on the inside. If you've ever been to a cedar swamp, they're very open. There's not a lot of vegetation around them. It tends to be, you know, cedar trees. So we put these boxes around the cedar swamps, and what happens is those mosquitoes, those Culicida melanura that I just showed you, at night they go up to feed on the roosting birds, they take a blood meal, and then they come back down and they look for a place to rest so that they're out of the sun, out of the wind, and they can develop their eggs there safely. They go into the boxes. So you can imagine that's the best time to see if there's any disease in your area. That mosquito's just bitten a bird. If the birds are carrying Eastern equine encephalitis, she's picked it up, and she's now sitting in my box. So I go to those boxes, I drop a board over the front of them, and I actually put in them enough carbon dioxide to knock the mosquitoes out, take all those mosquitoes back to the lab, keep them cold, keep them in the freezer. I sort them on a cold plate, put them on ice, send them to the state labs for testing. I'm doing that every week throughout the summer. So we've been doing that since the beginning of the beginning of June. We have 3 historic sites where we put out those resting boxes, Wellfleet, Dennis, and Barnstable, because those are sites on the Cape that have a large enough habitat, because we don't have really big Atlantic white cedar swamps or really big red maple swamps compared to off Cape in Bristol and Plymouth County, where you see a lot more Eastern equine encephalitis. But we do have some, and I'm looking for places where I'd also see roosting birds. So I use these 3 sites, and then if I find any disease, I sort of expand from those sites. So that's Eastern equine encephalitis and the type of monitoring we're doing for that. I'm going to move now to talking about West Nile virus, which was definitely is definitely more of a concern on Cape Cod, and definitely last year was a concern here in Falmouth. This is the mosquito that transmits this disease, Culex pipiens, the common house mosquito. She's called the common house mosquito because, you know, mosquitoes are like wild animals. They live outside. She's the type of mosquito that at night, if you open up your door, she'll come in. This is the species of mosquito that's usually buzzing around the bathroom or your bedroom at night, and you wonder, they keep finding me because you keep breathing out the carbon dioxide and she keeps finding you. Anyway, this mosquito bites birds and people. So now you're talking about more likely chance. With that other mosquito, it was a bird-biting mosquito that's amplifying Eastern equine encephalitis. So it requires another mosquito to accidentally pick it up and then carry it into the human population. With West Nile virus, the mosquito that carries it bites birds and people. Bites a bird, picks up the disease, carries it into the human population. It's very likely that a large number of people are exposed to this disease every summer, even on Cape Cod. The fact is that most people who are exposed to this disease do not show symptoms. It's closely related to Powassan virus, which I know has been in the paper a lot. That's a disease that's carried by ticks, but these are closely related viruses. There are people who do have extreme reactions to West Nile virus. There are a number of deaths each year from West Nile virus, but for the majority of people who get it, they show very mild symptoms, maybe a summer cold. The mosquitoes that carry the disease, that common house mosquito, she lays her eggs in man-made containers. And I've gone to some classes, and I was at a class maybe earlier this year, and you know, I talk to people and they say, how do they know that it's a man-made container? I don't know. I think that's a really interesting question. I think kids come up with fantastic questions. Anyway, they lay their eggs in man-made containers. You can see that would be a fantastic evolutionary advantage. If you only lay your eggs in man-made containers, you know man's around here somewhere making those containers. So there's going to be a blood meal somewhere around. These type of mosquitoes lay those egg rafts. They'll just keep laying them every week. As long as they have a place to lay their eggs, they'll keep cycling and increasing their populations. For instance, in somebody's bird bath, as long as you change the bird bath once a week, you won't have a mosquito problem. You'll dump out those mosquitoes. So usually you can control this around your yard by walking around, making sure to dump out containers after it rains. As long as you do that once a week, you're all set. There are obviously going to be places where you can't do that as well. One of those places are the road drains. Road drains that have been put in over the past 30 years are made, and these are some sitting out at the Barnstable DPW. They're all like this now, though. They're made to hold water in the bottom of a couple feet of water. The idea is that the water is going to run off the roads. It may have something in it from the roads, chemicals, particulate, whatever. That water runs off with whatever that is, and then it sits in that catch basin, and everything's supposed to sort of fall out of the water. They're like little mosquito factories up and down the roads. They're perfect. They're out of the sun, they're out of the wind. If you look down in them, a lot of them have that standing water in them. And if you want to know if there are mosquitoes in them, you just walk up and stomp on them. The mosquitoes just come flying out. Anyway, last year, for instance, we had a West Nile virus. We had increased risk for West Nile virus here in Falmouth. My crews treated over 4,800 road drains in Falmouth last year alone. So our crews are taking care of that. We put a bacteria into those road drains to kill any mosquitoes that are developing there. We're also sampling for mosquitoes that might be carrying West Nile virus. Again, those species lay their eggs in man-made containers. So what do? We make a trap that's a man-made container with stinky water in it. So this is a Rubbermaid container, and we have water in it that we've let sit out with hay in it, sort of made in a fusion, so it's very organic and very stinky. The female mosquitoes smell that and think that's a good place to lay their eggs, so they'll come flying in. There's a fan in this PVC pipe. They come flying in, they get sucked up into the net. Again, I take them back to my lab, I put them on ice, I identify them to species, I send them into the state lab for testing. And again, I've been doing that all around the Cape since the beginning of June. We have, for gravid traps, those traps where we're testing for West Nile virus, we focus on the Upper Cape, well, Mid-Cape to Upper Cape. Our traps are as far out as Orleans, and then you can see them all focused in this area. Mostly because of habitat. Those mosquitoes lay their eggs in man-made containers. And in the catch basins that hold water, the Lower Cape doesn't have a lot of that. We do some sampling on the Lower Cape, but we don't have regular sampling locations just because the habitat isn't there. And we don't see a lot of these species there. Back when they were testing birds, the crows were very sensitive to this disease when it first came into the United States. It's new to the United States. They were sending in the crows for testing to see whether they had West Nile virus, and it was crows at this end of the Cape as well. So it was based on historic bird counts and bird testing as well as mosquito testing. We also have this big empty space in here, which is not actually a big empty space. That's Joint Base Cape Cod. And we have the Senior Environmental Corps assisting us. Their volunteers put out traps on Joint Base Cape Cod. So we're collecting from there as well, from these traps, and sending in mosquitoes for testing. So all that work, and now we get some results. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Public Health has a website, mosquitoresults.com. You can go here. They're updating it throughout the summer as information comes in. On this website, if you go there, you can see a map that shows risk of transmission for Eastern equine encephalitis or risk of transmission of West Nile virus. You can click on your town to see what the risk is in your town, whether samples have come in and tested positive. So you can see to date, these are the most recent maps. As of this week, we're starting to see West Nile virus in Massachusetts. I haven't had any samples come back from Cape Cod that are positive with West Nile virus. We've been sending in lots. This is the risk map for West Nile virus over here. This risk map is, you can't really see the colors well, but this map is all blue except for this yellow here. So in Massachusetts, the Department of Public Health believes that West Nile virus is in every town at a low level. So the risk is there in all towns. The yellow towns are where you have moderate risk. Last year, the map showed Falmouth as a yellow town with moderate risk as time went on and as we continued to catch mosquitoes with West Nile virus. The Eastern equine encephalitis map is a little different. The green here is actually remote. So that's a level lower than low, if that makes sense. We have a few towns on the Cape that are at that blue low level for Eastern equine encephalitis, Barnstable, Dennis, and Brewster, because historically I've picked up mosquitoes in those towns that are carrying Eastern equine encephalitis, not because anybody's ever gotten it. This is just to give you an idea of all my arbovirus results from 2005 to 2015. The ones in yellow are the few samples I've gotten that were positive for Eastern equine encephalitis. Not so many, and once I'd get a positive, I would put out a bunch of traps to see if it was in the area and see if there was more, and I never found more. So I would say most likely a bird came through, the mosquito bit that bird, picked up the disease, bird moved on. This is last year, and you can see as you look at the towns, Falmouth had a lot of West Nile virus. You would think with how dry it had been last year, we went into drought, that would be a year when you wouldn't see a lot of mosquitoes, you wouldn't see a lot of disease. But what happened was we had a couple of dry years leading up to a third year of drought. It's the same as what happened in Dallas. Dallas a number of years ago, not that many years ago, a few years ago, had an outbreak of West Nile virus. A number of people died in Dallas because of West Nile virus. What happens is you get these drought years. So now you have water that's never being flushed out. Every time it rains, and we had a couple weeks ago that really pounding rain where we got a lot of inches of rain in a quick time, that just washes all the water out. Now the mosquitoes have to start over again. These slow rains aren't like that. So if you have a drought year, you're never getting a rain that washes water out. Now, the little bit of water that's there, it's going to keep standing there, and mosquitoes are going to keep developing in it. The other thing is that you only have these small pools of water. So what are the birds going to do? They're going to all be congregating around those small pools of water. So now you've got mosquitoes and you've got birds all together. So you do tend to see West Nile virus in a drought year because of that. Oh, so last year, where were the mosquitoes in Falmouth coming from? Because we had that increased risk for transmission of West Nile virus. A lot of places, but a lot of boats. It was big boats with tarps, this big boat with a tarp over it. It was little boats like this kayak full of mosquitoes, hundreds of them coming out of it. No matter how many road drains we treated in certain areas, we were still continuing to get lots of mosquitoes. My crews went, that extra mile walking to people's properties, and pointing out to people, this is an issue. This is where our mosquitoes are coming from. Last year, Zika became something that the news just caught on to, and it's something that we continue to hear about. A lot of people have had concerns about it. This is the sort of thing you'd see running on the news stations. There are only 2 species of mosquitoes that we know of in the Americas that are capable of transmitting Zika. Aedes aegypti is a tropical mosquito and only exists in these southern states. And I have a friend who works in Georgia. She barely sees them even in Georgia. Aedes albopictus is the Asian tiger mosquito. This is more accurate map of what's going on with Aedes albopictus, that Asian tiger mosquito. That's a mosquito that was imported into the United States back in the 80s, and then a couple other times it came in on tires that had come in for recycling. It came into Texas, and it's come into a few other ports, and you can see how it's spread all across the eastern United States, and it's spreading again through the Midwest. This is a map that the CDC did last year to see where that mosquito was, because the concern is this is the species of mosquito that may be transmitting Zika in our area. And you can see, sure enough, in Massachusetts, there are populations of this mosquito that's capable of transmitting this disease. So what's new for us is something's always new for us. So this year we've begun to intensify trapping to see if we do find this mosquito. So this is a picture of that Asian tiger mosquito. Last year we had none that we found in our county, but they did find some in Onset, which is not really that far away. It's just over the bridge. So I guess I can't say never because it looks like perhaps headed this way. This type of mosquito lays her eggs in man-made containers, but she prefers really small man-made containers. Loves something like, you know, those plastic water bottles everybody drinks out of? They've got the nice little top. I can't imagine in an urban environment that there aren't tons of these types of things around, and this mosquito is just developing by I can't even imagine the numbers. So we're putting out our own containers. We put stuff inside of them for the mosquitoes to lay her eggs on. She comes into something like this or black cups of some other sort. She lays her eggs on the papers that are inside, and then we take the papers back to the lab and I let them hatch and see what mosquitoes are laying their eggs on the papers. So far this year, no Asian tiger mosquitoes still in Cape Cod and Barnstable County. They're picking them up in other counties in Massachusetts now, but our county hasn't gotten any yet. I keep looking. So I put this out last year, and I try to encourage different agencies to put this out as well. I have these flyers at the back of the room. I would encourage somebody to call us if they were getting bitten by mosquitoes during the daytime, but they were little tiny mosquitoes. These mosquitoes, they look so cool. You'd think, oh, I'd recognize that mosquito with the big line. They're teeny, teeny, tiny mosquitoes because they're developing places like a water bottle. They're too crowded to be big mosquitoes. So they're these little teeny mosquitoes. They tend to bite your legs, and they bite during the day. If you have a saltwater mosquito problem, which happens sometimes, they bite anywhere. You would never notice. They're big, they're hungry, they're aggressive. You would never confuse this mosquito with those. So I have had a few people who have called our office thinking that they have these mosquitoes because should they come into the county, I'd want to be able to react to that immediately. I put out traps and I haven't found any of them. So that's good, right? None of those mosquitoes here. So again, I know it was my message throughout the talk, mosquitoes lay their eggs and develop in standing water. So the thing you can do to help yourself not have mosquitoes at dusk is to get rid of all the standing water that's in your yard. Another thing you can do is choose a repellent that is a good repellent. How do you tell if a repellent is going to be effective? You look at the repellent's label. You see if it has an EPA registration number on it. It'll say EPA registration number. If it has an EPA registration number, that means that it's tested to be effective and also safe to use on your skin. I've had a few talks with the County Extension Service. You know, at a lot of the farmers markets, there are people who are selling natural products for mosquito repellents. They haven't been tested to be effective. The other side of that is, again, they haven't been tested for use on skin to be safe. And unfortunately, people are having skin reactions to a lot of those natural products. So it's really important to look at the label. People say it about everything, whether you're buying bread or whether you're buying repellent, look at the label. With repellents, EPA registration number. Follow the directions on the label for it to be safe and effective. Be careful being out at certain times of day. The mosquitoes that bite you at dusk are most likely the species that would be carrying disease. If you're being bitten by mosquitoes, go in. You can always call my agency. I'll send out a crew. I'm always amazed by the people who call and tell me that their kid has 100 mosquito bites on them. I think, why? Why didn't you ask the kid to come in earlier than that? Make sure that you fix any holes that are in your screens or in your windows, because that's how the mosquitoes are getting in at night, especially that Culex pipiens that might be carrying West Nile virus. So that's everything from mosquitoes on Cape Cod to controlling them. So I hope you learned something. I hope you'll go home and check around your yard and empty out any containers. You're welcome. Yeah. Oh, so that's a good question. And one of the theories is, especially with eastern equine encephalitis, because that's the one that's been here longer and more studied, the birds pick it up in the previous year, they go south, they may even carry it with them south. The virus then goes sort of dormant in the bird's body, and then when the bird comes back north, birds go through that physiological changes to get to their egg laying stage. And so some of those birds, when they go through those physiological changes, something happens in them, and we're not really sure what, but it activates the virus again. So you've got those few birds that carried it over from last year to this year that come back north, virus activates in that bird again, mosquito bites that bird and picks up the disease. It started with a mosquito maybe the year before, transmitted from another bird. With eastern encephalitis, it's been here for a long time, so it's something that's been studied historically. West Nile virus is a little newer to the country. One of the ideas with West Nile virus is that it may also overwinter in the mosquitoes. The type of mosquitoes that carry West Nile virus spend the winter as adult mosquitoes. So if a mosquito picked up the virus last year and she hibernates in a tree, in a pipe, in somebody's house, and then as she comes out of hibernation, diapause, she starts to activate again, she'll still be carrying that virus. So it could be mosquitoes are bringing it through the winter into the summer again. Yes? There's a lot of controversy about DEET. What I would say is that DEET is formulated to be used on your skin. DEET is safe to use if you read the label and apply it by the label recommendations. I think it's like anything else you put on your skin, it's all about your body's reaction to it. So somebody may be sensitive to it in the same way some people are lactose intolerant, or some people are sensitive to different things. So DEET is not the only product that's registered with the EPA for use to repel mosquitoes. I use the permethrin that I treat my clothes with because I'm worried about ticks too. But oil of lemon eucalyptus is a product that's been registered with the EPA, and you'll find products that's the active ingredient in. Picaridin's another one. There are a number of different products that are on the market that have been tested as effective and safe, that have EPA registrations, that have things that aren't DEET in them. I end up not using DEET very often, not because it's not effective, not because I have a reaction. I don't like, no matter what scent they put in it, I don't like the way it smells, and it feels like it's on my skin all day. It's effective, and if mosquitoes really bother me, I might use it, but I'd rather wear long sleeves than I don't smell like DEET. But it does work well. Yes? Oh, it's all different for different diseases. Some diseases are definitely transmitted transovarially, which means that if the female mosquito has that disease, it's transmitted into her progeny. Some diseases are like that. Most diseases are not. Most diseases, the progeny are hatching and developing without the disease, and they pick it up in the adult stage. So for the most part, with the diseases we see around here, the majority of the time, the mosquito is picking it up from a bird that's infected with it. I've been to talks where they've talked about it, but no, we just use the BTI. You're welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being my audience. Very much. It's hard.
All set?
Yes. So wait, how do I turn this?